Hello everyone, welcome back to the Mind Body Soul Transformation Podcast. It's really great to have you back with me here for episode number 3. In today's episode, we're going to continue to build upon some of the themes we've touched on in episode 1 and 2. In particular, how to live in alignment with your truest and most authentic self. Now, in episode 2, we focused our conversation much around how questioning every aspect of our life, how we're feeling, plays a role in us being able to identify the path forward that leads us to living in alignment with ourselves. And I want to expand on this today about how we can come to better understand ourselves and how this is a key piece of the puzzle in living our truest and most authentic life. So I want to start by sharing a quote I recently heard in a podcast episode with Danny Morell, where he shared, "To grow tall, we must grow deep." That was something that hit me and resonated with me. And I've reflected along that quote many times since. And I think there's many learnings and offerings there for us in just those words alone that we can reflect on, we can take away, we can think about and apply to different aspects of our life. But in today's conversation, I want to center that around how we can focus on the idea that we need to tend to the deepest and darkest parts of ourselves, to really understand these, to heal, to accept these, and to stop these from blocking our ability to create the foundation that is needed for us to grow into the biggest and best versions of ourselves. To do this, we must be willing to face the parts of ourselves and our past experiences that make us uncomfortable, and actually mine these for the gold that lies within these. The opportunities to better understand ourselves, to heal ourselves, to forgive ourselves and give ourselves grace, and to love ourselves unconditionally. And of course, to then grow, to have worked through those foundations, mined those blocks, allowed our roots to grow deeper, so that we can continue to do the work to grow bigger and stronger and more true to ourselves than ever before. To do this, we must be willing to face the fear and the discomfort that comes with being radically honest with ourselves and facing the fear that lies beneath the surface, and be willing to move through this, to mine this for the opportunities, and to allow our roots to grow deeper and stronger than ever before. To live a life in alignment with our most truest and authentic selves, we must be able to recognize when these past versions of us, these triggers, these self-beliefs are showing up. And to be able to respond to these from a place of understanding and grace and empathy and love, and to guide ourselves back onto the path. You see, there's 2 key aspects of living a life in alignment with the truest and most authentic version of you, with that voice inside that's telling you the path that you're meant to be on and how you're meant to be contributing to this world. The first is what we discussed in episode 2. It is being able to connect into and listen to that inner voice inside, and listen to the messages that you're receiving from the world that resonate with that part of you, and follow that advice one step at a time. But the other big aspect is being able to recognize when you have been derailed from this path. And more often than not, that is going to be by yourself. By letting these past beliefs, past identities, old comfort zones allow you to get off your path, and recognizing when this isn't aligned with the path that you are meant to be on. This isn't aligned with that inner voice inside. This isn't aligned with where you are trying to head. The interesting part here, for me at least, is that idea of the comfort zone. In the last episode, I spoke about how, for me, feeling in, checking in with myself was am I feeling at peace, in alignment and calm in this decision? or in the other side of making a decision that I've made. And that's how I've known I'm where I'm meant to be. That's how I've checked in with myself. This is actually very different to the idea of my comfort zone. In fact, particularly early on in this process, I don't think this is just for me, the very act of making decisions and moving from a place of alignment with yourself is actually very uncomfortable. Because we are most comfortable in the experiences, in the relationships, in the circumstances in which we have existed for much of our life. This actually means that we may be more comfortable in chaos, in avoidance, in codependency, in toxic relationship patterns, in people pleasing, in not being your true self at all. Stepping out of these patterns, stepping out of your comfort zone takes courage, takes a willingness to be uncomfortable and embrace the uncertainty of not knowing how the world and those around you are going to respond to and receive that version of you. For me, I am very much still deep in the work of this. Some of the big themes that have come up for me I want to share with you today, in the essence of being vulnerable and in the hope that maybe some of this resonates for you and allows you to identify your own comfort zones, your own patterns, your own things that are holding you back. So as I've worked through the last few months, I've seen some recurring themes and patterns that show up in my life in so many ways. And this is something I'm truly grateful for, that has been an opportunity that's arisen out of the challenge, that's allowed me to recognize patterns, beliefs, things that were holding me back, that were rooted deep, deep, deep in the inner parts of me, many of which had come from childhood. By acknowledging these and recognizing these, not only have I been able to work through some of the situations that might have contributed to these, but I've also been able to recognize them, see the patterns across the different relationships in my life, see the patterns in the things that I am triggered by, and in the moment, recognize these and be able to respond to these from a place of grace and understanding. That's the key piece. I'm not perfect. I'm still working through all of this. It still shows up for me on a daily. But I am now better able to recognize when it is showing up, better able to respond, and sometimes better able to give myself the space so I am responding. I'm not reacting from that deep dark part of me that's triggered, to give myself the space to go, that's interesting that I'm reacting like that I want to do X, Y, and Z. Usually for me that's bursts into tears. But how do I want to respond in this situation? How does the best, truest, most authentic version of me want to respond in this situation? That's why we've got to do this deep work, because it allows us the ability to recognize and make sure we are responding from a place that is aligned. And that's the hardest to do in the moments that challenge us the most. So for me, the big themes have been the following. The first two I think are closely linked, but I'm going to separate them and talk through them separately. The first is people pleasing. This is a big one for me, one I still struggle with. I'm getting better at, but the underlying cause of that for me is wanting to be safe, is wanting to be loved, and feeling like I have to be or show up as a particular type of person for that to happen, as a person that doesn't upset other people, even if that means abandoning myself, as a person that doesn't challenge the status quo or challenge the ideas of others, even where that rubs up against my integrity and my values. This is a huge one for me. And as I said, I've still got a lot of work to do here, but I am getting better at recognizing it in myself, and I am getting a lot better at standing firm in particularly showing up in a way that is aligned with my integrity and my values. They're the boundaries that I've been able to find the pillar of strength in that I need to be able to show up authentically in really challenging situations. Because the reality is, across all aspects of our lives, people would prefer we show up in a particular way that aligns with them. But the reality is, we're all different. We all have different values. We all have different perspectives on things. We all have different needs, and we all have our own levels of emotional intelligence and ability to step into that, ask for the support we need, lean on each other when we need. And all of those differences cause the tensions that lead to that discomfort of turning up and showing up as the truest, most authentic version of me. Linked to this, from what I've been able to work through so far, is fear of asking for support, fear of leaning on others and asking them to hold space for me. And this has been especially true in the last few months, or where I've really come to go, I see that. I naturally, I hope, am someone that others can lean on, but I find it really hard to ask for people to hold space for me when I'm going through a challenging time, for me to dump some of my bigger emotions on, truly let it all out, process it. Can you give me some space to talk through this way? And I think some of you that know me well are going to be surprised by this, because you'll also know at the same time I'm a wear my heart on the sleeve kind of person. And there's truth in that. But there's truth in that up until a certain point. And so I think again that links into the people pleasing. And I also think it leans into the next point. I think all three of these actually are really closely linked, because the other big thing that I've come to recognize is I have a huge fear around not feeling safe in my connections and relationships. And I don't mean that from that I've got unsafe connections and relationships in my life, because I don't think that's true. I'm very lucky in that sense. But for some reason, I haven't allowed myself to fall into those enough for me to be me, to ask for what I want and need in those relationships, and to feel safe enough in those connections to know I am valued and loved no matter how I turn up, as long as I'm being my true authentic self. And that's across the board. So you can see from the emotion that's rising within me that these are big things for me. I'm still doing that deep, dark work of diving deep, because the reality is, what I know for around those things in particular, the truest, most authentic version of myself that I want to be is also someone that can be in deep, deep, loving connections with other people, where I can support people in their deepest, darkest parts of themselves, and I can be supported in my deepest, darkest parts of myself, not just the superficial stuff, not just that when things are going well, but when things are falling apart, or when things are really challenging, or when I've got a perspective on things that might not align with that other person, that my connections are deep enough and strong enough that I can be received in that, and I can receive others like that in return. Because the reality is, all three of those things have impacted my ability to connect with and speak my truth, as well as connect with others. And that's not what I want for my life moving forward. The other key part for me here that I've been doing some work around is how I have internalized others' beliefs and messages about me, and internalize them in a way that I've now believed them, and it affects how I show up in my life, or what I believe I'm capable, and it limits me. There's probably many of these. Some of the big ones are the message that I receive often that I'm too emotional. I know I'm not going to be alone in that one. I know there'll be many of you listening that are deeply empathetic, deeply sensitive, and that will have heard that phrase all too often. I can't remember if I touched on this in my last podcast or if I've journaled about it. But what I'm coming to realize is that my emotionality is a superpower, and feeling that I can't be who I really am has limited me greatly in how I show up in the world and how people receive me, because I know I'm not being authentic. So that's a big one, too emotional, and trying to turn that around. The other two have been, I guess, more external perspectives of me or external parts that have impacted my belief in myself. One is that I'm not able to communicate. Interestingly, I've received this the most from my closest connections and relationships. And I've struggled with that. And I felt shame around that. Like, why does that person perceive me as not open, not being willing to communicate, not able to communicate, when, as I just said, all I want is a relationship that is deep enough and connected enough that I can communicate openly and share how I'm feeling about things and share some of the wackier thoughts that are going on in my head and be received for that. So I can see how those two things are linked, that I haven't felt safe enough, and this is not putting blame on anyone else, but I haven't felt safe enough in my connections and relationships to lean into that and communicate about things that I want to communicate about, because I have no interest in communicating about the superficial things in life. So I can see the two sides of that coin. And the other thing I can see is that I've internalized that, and then that's shown up for me in other parts of my life, not just where I'm not communicating in the deep ways that I want to within my relationships, but how when I'm faced with needing to communicate in a work setting or in a more formal setting or in a professional setting, that I don't have that belief in my ability to do that. When I am considering starting a podcast, that I think, but Donna, you're not naturally gifted at verbal communication. It's holding me back. It's held me back. And do I have stuff to learn? Do I have skills to develop around communication? Do I have some deep work to do to unlock those blocks that are holding me back from deep connection with others around communication? Absolutely. But I don't want to let this hold me back anymore. And the last one, and this is a particularly vulnerable one for me to share. This is probably one of the ones that I felt the most shame around, is the idea that I am bad with money. And again, this is something I've heard from those closest to me in my life. It's been their perspective, and it's certainly been a belief that I have internalized. And you know what? I'm starting to realize that internalizing that belief makes it a self-fulfilling prophecy. That I cannot welcome in the abundance or feel I am worthy of the abundance that the world could offer me and I could offer the world, whilst I believe that I'm not good at that. That I'm not worthy of that. That I don't do the right things around money that make me deserving of that. And so these are just some of the internalized beliefs that have limited me, that have created shame, fear, and unwanted stories within me and have held me back from, again, aligning with where I'm meant to be, what I'm meant to be doing, and speaking my truth, living from that place of true authenticity. I have a long way to go in this space, but I'm working on letting go of these stories and connecting with the truth of who I am. of breaking down the walls that I've built out of fear and trusting that I can be received and loved and valued for who I truly am. And acknowledging that by making that decision and showing up in that way, that there will be relationships, connections, and other things in my life that fall away because they're not in alignment with where I am meant to be. And that's okay. Will I grieve those things? Absolutely. Will I be forever grateful for what they have given me, taught me, and for the fact that those things combined have brought me to this part in my life? Absolutely. I'm filled with gratitude. But the reality is, to walk this path forward, to walk to where I'm meant to be going, I need to make space for the new connections, the new circumstances, the new opportunities that will come in for me when I'm in alignment with the path of where I'm going. I can't remember where I heard this. I think it was on a podcast recently about this idea of we're stepping into this new path and we're going down a path that is aligned with our truest, most authentic self. But we're carrying all this stuff from the past. Our arms are full of past stuff. All these limitations, all these self-beliefs, all these connections, all these relationships, our job, our home, whatever it might be, our arms are full and we're trying to drag this stuff with us. And on this path, we have someone walking towards us with all our new opportunities, our new connections, our new jobs, our new houses, our new whatever. And they want to offer that stuff to us. That person wants to give us all of that, but our arms are full and we can't accept it unless we're willing to let go of those things from the past that we no longer need. Those things from the past that might be holding us back. Because by letting go and making space for the new, not only are we jumping right into the opportunities there, but it's the reality that those connections and those opportunities will let us live from a place of authenticity, that will make us feel more in alignment, that will give me that feeling of peace and calmness and connection with my heart that is telling me I'm in the right place. And most importantly, will be the foundation of what will allow us to make the difference in the world, make the contribution in the world that we are here to make. So, I have a little bit of homework for you. First piece of Mind Body Soul Transformation podcast homework. I really want you to take some time in the next week before we drop the next episode and reflect on the following. And you can do this by taking some quiet time somewhere at home. You can journal. You can go take a walk in nature. If you're a runner like me, you can do it while you're out running. You can even do it on your commute to or from work. But I really want you to connect with the questions I'm about to ask you and think about what the answers are for you. The first is, what parts of you limiting self-beliefs, either your own or internalized ones, or parts of your past experiences and traumas are holding you back? Where do those things show up in a way that holds you back? And how do they show up? Really thinking about, actually, when that comes up for me, how do I respond? And trying to understand that. Because what does your response have to teach you or show you? Not only in being able to recognize it, but there's often a lesson there in your response itself. What is beneath that? I don't know if you've heard these questions before, but the idea of asking a question like that, what is it about your past beliefs and past traumas and so on that's holding you back? How are you responding? What's beneath that? And then asking again, what's beneath that? What's beneath that? Trying to get down to the root cause of what that's trying to tell you. And lastly, what would it take for you to heal or accept these parts of yourself and move forward with gratitude for the lessons that they have to offer you. So how can we turn these blocks and limitations and things that are holding us back into something that not only can we recognize, not only can we learn from, but to use them as catalysts for future growth? Almost like coming back to our root analogy, we've got this rock in the ground and it's blocking our roots growing deeper, forming stronger foundations. What would it take to turn that rock into, I don't know, fertilizer to really propel the growth of that root further and deeper into the ground, more stable for your truest, most authentic version of yourself to grow above ground? What would that take? And what steps can you do to make that happen for you? Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for episode 3. I hope there was something in this episode that you can take away with you to help you in your journey to transforming your life, to aligning with that inner voice, to doing some of the deeper work and understanding of yourself that just can make, I guess, the everyday experience of your life that little bit better. I would love it if you're willing to, if you could share what you took from this episode with me in the comments below, or send me a DM on Instagram. I really would love to get some feedback on if this is resonating and how it's resonating, so I can make sure I'm continuing to share messages, share ideas, share my learnings that is aligning with this community that we're building around this podcast. I am wishing you all a wonderful week full of love and light. Thank you so much, and I will be back again same time next week. Bye, everyone.